Hello, welcome to the session on Grow Anything, Anywhere. I'm Jennifer Schenker, Editor-in-Chief of The Innovator, a global publication about technology and innovation. It is my pleasure to introduce our panelists today. We have Bahia Jafar, Deputy Chairman and Deputy CEO of Kuwaiti Danish Dairy Company. Welcome, Bahia. We have Porrick McDonnell, CEO of Agilent Technologies. Welcome, Porrick. Viswa Colluru, Founder and Chief Executive Officer of Enveda Therapeutics. And Ilham Kadri, CEO of Senesco. I'm just going to take a minute to set the scene. Over the past year, supply chain disruption has shifted from being an episodic risk to a structural concern. In 2024 alone, an estimated 80% of organizations experienced some form of supply chain disruption, affecting a broad range of sectors. These disruptions have exposed the limits of supply chains that demand heavily on geographically concentrated resources, complex logistics, and just-in-time production models. At the same time, advances in bioinnovation are opening up new possibilities that could help make supply chains more resilient to inevitable shocks. Yet, many stakeholders remain unfamiliar with how biological approaches can provide industrial alternatives. From biological processes and production systems to bio-based inputs themselves, biology can enable the production of critical inputs closer to the point of use, reduce dependence on scarce or geopolitically sensitive resources, and produce greater flexibility into production systems. But despite significant technological progress and the potential to challenge business as usual across industries, bio-innovation is still far from being considered a cornerstone of supply chain resilience at scale. Adoption remains uneven. Regulatory pathways are complex. Capital requirements are high, and integration with existing industrial systems is often challenging. Throughout our conversation today, we'll explore what is holding back the wider deployment of a supply chain solution and what could enable a future in which more materials, molecules, processes, and inputs are grown rather than extracted or transported over long distances. We'll examine the technological, economic, and policy dimensions of this transition and consider what would it take for bioinnovation to move from promise to practice across key sectors. With that, I'd like to move right into our conversation, and I'd like to start with you, Ilham. So how is Senesco applying bioinnovation to raw material transformation, and what implications does this have for supply chain resilience during this climate of uncertainty?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. This is an important subject. So let me say a few words about Senesco. We are a leading specialty material and specialty chemicals company. You find us in batteries, in your non-metallic aviation, you find us in your semiconductors, in your bio shampoo, in your personal care, and your waterborne decorative paints. So I represent today probably the hidden parts of the materials world is the chemical industry, right? We are there, right? You need raw materials, you need molecules to produce everything you are using in your daily life. So you said it very well and you put it into the context. We are a bit like a cook, right? We need raw materials to produce something called molecules, polymers, whatever, and then supply it to the consumer. So far, our raw materials have been oil-based or mining, you know, from earth, right? And I think for us, finding new sources for our raw material is just a way for de-risking our supply chain. We've seen it with the COVID shocks where the borders have been closed. We couldn't get critical raw materials and even some commodities because the borders were closed. You talked about geopolitical crisis and rare earths in, with the monopoly in China or whatever. You need to diversify and secure your value chains, right? Because this is important. If not, it's going to impact your bottom line. So we are not doing it for charity or for morality, right? We are doing all of this as well because it's materiality and its impacts. So that's for me diversification of the raw materials. So the bioeconomy for ScienceCo is about using waste. If you reuse, the waste is not a waste anymore. Can we do more of this? It's about using plants which are not in competition with food. So you find it in rosemary extract in Morocco, where we are using it for fragrances and food, etc. You find it in guar, which is a plant growing in arid Rajasthan in India, and you can use it in your bio shampoo. So we started doing more of this. We use enzymes and bacteria, for example, as a new source, supplying fermentation, which is one of the oldest chemical processes in the world, but you need to scale it, etc. So there is a bunch of avenues for the chemists we are to use the bio, sourcing as a way to feed our monomers, our raw material, and to produce bio-sourced products, right? Now, obviously, this is an emerging trend. It's not yet at the right cost. We need value chains. We cannot do it alone. So we need suppliers and the bio, supply chain to be around us, around our sites, manufacturing sites, to give us that, supply chain continuity, security of supply, and then scale it up to be affordable, because affordability is important and it has to be scalable. And probably we'll talk about the regulatory environment later on.
Yes, we surely will. Let me turn now to you, Patrick. And let me ask, Agilent operates across analytical platforms, automation, and manufacturing technologies that support both biopharmaceutical and industrial biotechnology workflows. How can these enabling technologies influence the ability to design and scale and validate the biological processes that are needed for us to move to the bioeconomy?
Yeah, so Agilent is a tools player. One of our key markets is biopharma. So we help customers really check on the raw materials for fidelity, look at the processes, how biopharma production is made, and ultimately make great products and test those products for quality. And when you think about what we do, is some of the things that are really important is at-line process analytical technologies that we're doing at-line to get early warning about what can change in a process. And biopharma production and factories are notoriously fixed, right? So the supply chains are very fixed. So the big opportunity is how can you move supply chains? And our tools are used in that to make sure that we have fidelity on the raw materials, equivalency around the world, and ultimately regulatory equivalency, so we can help customers set up in different parts of the globe.
So the flexibility, you're introducing some flexibility for these biopharma companies,
yes,
in order for them to move into the bioeconomy.
Yes, and I mean, raw materials, you need to have raw materials that can be global, it can be within region for region, and the testing of those materials is absolutely critical in terms of the regulatory environment, so that's where we come in to help.
Okay, thank you. Then let me now move to you, Viswa. In the spirit of being grown first, Enveda is learning from life to discover medicines 4 times faster than the industry average. What implications does Enveda's discovery model for reading and translating nature's hidden chemistry have for reducing geographic dependencies in the pharmaceutical supply chain?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And before I dive into Enveda, I actually want to share a couple of facts that I think came to light during the pandemic, especially from a US perspective. So if you call 911 in the US today, 2 out of 3 ambulances won't have enough epinephrine, which is the active ingredient in your EpiPen, to actually treat the emergency. That is because the supply chain is at such risk and the active intermediates are sourced from other countries. Today, there's a list of essential medicines that the FDA maintains, and over 90% of them have at least one step in the process that is completely outside the control of the United States, and therefore is, for example, a sovereign risk. And all of this is largely driven by the fact that manufacturing over time has become a game of extremely thin margins. And as a drug becomes generic, there's competition to the bottom, so to speak. And so drugs go from being manufactured in the West or in the US to being manufactured in India and China and ultimately, Taiwan. And then they sort of fall off from there, and nobody makes them because they can't make enough money. So that is the risk in the supply chain, not just in innovative medicines, but essential medicines that we need, even if a large pharma company is no longer commanding a huge margin on it. Now, that is a very bleak state of affairs, and I'm going to switch to your question, which is how is the technology that we're building allowing us to create a more resilient supply chain? So to understand what Enveda does, maybe I'll put a quick fact in context. We know more about the genes of random viruses from the bottom of polar ice caps than we know about the chemistry of human blood. So you have thousands of molecules right now flowing through your veins, and the best laboratories in the world can identify the structure and potentially a smaller fraction of the function of just about 10%. Right? And that's because chemistry never had its sequencing moment. What next generation sequencing did to DNA, analytical chemistry never had that equivalent. And so what we've built at Enveda is technology that allows us to essentially take any sample in the world and ask two questions. What are the molecules and what do they do? And this led us to two things. One, look for medicines in nature, because most of nature occurs as complex chemistry. And this allows us directly to use, for example, soil, sunlight, and farming, three things that we've either have access to, fingers crossed, or have scaled at a planet level for a very long time in order to create medicines. So many of our medicines are mostly manufactured by a plant in a net carbon negative manner, unless you use the roots. And we've made plants more resilient so that we can literally grow them anywhere. And that's one key aspect. The second key aspect is, while we never realized the breadth of applications a sequencer for the world's chemistry could have, one of the big unlocks that it provided is the ability to do chemical synthesis at scale. And so we recently announced a positive pilot in collaboration with another startup called Flow Corporation, sanctioned by the White House, where we wanted to demonstrate that we can create the amount of data that is required for artificial intelligence systems to learn and effectively become the world's best synthetic organic chemist. And in just about 6 months' time, using the tech that we've built, we were able to do chemical reactions in mixtures and generate more data than anything that is publicly available over 35 years in the pharmaceutical industry, and teach AI systems to predict the best reaction conditions and starting materials for creating any reagent. We think that this oracle, as it continues to be built, will create enough margin that we can re-onshore manufacturing and create essential medicines right where they're needed. So that's, I think, a reason to be extremely positive about how technology can create resilient supply chains.
Thank you. Let me turn to you now, Bahia. So you come from a different perspective, one of a large regional food producer. Which parts of the food value chain are most realistically suited to biologically enabled alternatives?
Thank you for having me, Jennifer. I would like to start from the perspective of growing anything. And going to the word anything is, for us, is to define the food itself. What is real food, and how can we make sure that we can, in the future, be able to feed the 9 billion people that are on Earth. Obviously, we will not be able to do it just by producing or manufacturing what we manufacture. So at KDD a few years ago, we started a journey, a scientific journey to check the products that we have and to define really how healthy they are and how can we support and organize better food better processed food anyway. So we created the metabolic matrix that is built on 3 levels: protect the liver, feed the gut, and support the brain. And in that, because the food value chain is estimated at $9 trillion, the effect of having these foods have negativity on the environment and health bills. So what we are trying to do from the food perspective is to ensure that the food is healthy. What we eat is real food. Where we grow it at the end of the day is not as important. It can be grown on a farm, in land, or in a lab, where, you know, a lot of companies have started doing that. But it has to be real. It has to be good for our gut. It has to protect our liver, and it has to support the brain. Now, obviously, Kuwait is in a very difficult area where you cannot grow things. So using bio food grown in labs would be very good for us. What we would look for is a reduction in sugar, for example, and that can be done in fermentation of raw materials. I know you do other raw materials, but fermentation of raw materials like sugar and fructose, and creating it in the lab, that would be a possibility as long as it is healthy at the end of the day. Which part of the food value chain today we see in Kuwait? Kuwait has started some vertical agriculture. They're doing some vegetables in the desert. But we don't really know how good this is because they're not grown in the earth, right? We don't know whether the nutrients are enough for us or not. So the aim for us in the future, or along with different panels in the World Economic Forum, would be to create this, to ensure that the growth, whatever we're growing, is healthy at the end of the day for the 9 billion people that need to eat at the end of the day.
Just as a quick follow-up, you're already producing a food that,
yes,
you know, is safe for diabetics.
Exactly. So 5 years ago, we started a journey. Our chairman wanted to see how healthy our products were. We started as a dairy and then developed into a juice and ice cream and different products. And we thought we were doing the right thing, right? Juice, rather than drinking a Pepsi or a Coca-Cola or something that has sugar. Let's drink juice. And obviously, juice has also sugar. It's not called sugar, but it has sugar in, right? And because it's a juice, you lose the fiber, and it's not healthy for you at the end of the day. So what we did is we had a scientific team who checked all our raw materials, our finished products. It took around 2 years. And we created, that scientific team created the metabolic matrix that is based on science, and checked all the products and had them put in different tiers, from tier 1 to tier 5, being the best or the worst. And this is very scientific. I won't even be able to explain the whole thing here, but they put our products into different tiers, and what we have been able in the past 2 years is to transform some of our products into healthy products. And the example I shared with you a few days ago is we have worked with the Dasman Diabetes Institute in Kuwait to create a chocolate ice cream. This chocolate ice cream has no sugar. It has a sugar substitute that does not affect your gut negatively. And we have done a clinical testing on diabetes patients over a period of 9 months in Kuwait. It was sponsored by International Diabetes Center. And so we created the product. They did the clinical test over 9 months. So all diabetes patients who participated tried the ice cream for a period of 9 months. Throughout that period, they checked their insulin level, and at the end of the journey, that product showed that their insulin level remained the same. In some cases, it went down. And today we have a range of products that we are developing along with our scientific team in order to not only help those diabetes patients, but also other people who are looking at their health. In our part of the world, in the Gulf states, like in the US and maybe less in Europe, diabetes patients' obesity is extremely large. The Gulf countries are rated second, third in the world as a percentage of their population. And we wanted really to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. And yesterday we had an accredited event where we showcased what we have done. Obviously, one company alone in the small part of the world cannot do it on its own, right? We need other companies to follow. And what is good about the metabolic matrix, it's scalable, it's available. We're sharing it with the world. We want other companies to follow through and to help us make the world a better place at the end of the day, a healthier place.
Thank you. Let me turn back to you, Ilham. And if we envision future industries that are predominantly grown first, what would that look like for Synesco, and how would this play into your mission of leveraging scientific expertise for the betterment of humanity?
Well, I mean, it's like any innovation. It needs time, it needs scale, it needs to get into the right cost curve to be adopted largely. So I think it reminds me, I mean, I've been 30 years in the industry. I've been leading chemical companies and Synesco till the 1st of Jan. So I think, you know, the move, for example, from oil as an energy or LNG to actually renewables took time, and it took time for renewables now to be, you know, an affordable source of energy in some areas in the world. So it's gonna go through this. It's just the history of any innovation, including petrochemicals. So yeah, the bioeconomy is an emerging one. I think first it starts in the lab, so innovation takes time. And I think it's important for companies like Synesco, the chemical industry, but also for academia, for, you know, startups and other entrepreneurs. So my company in the past years, Synesco acquired 2 startups, right? One in Morocco, one in, you know, in Korea. We partnered with the farmers in Rajasthan for the guar supply chain, building sustainable one. And we partner with our customers to build the business case. It's all about the business case, because this is not, again, for charity. You know, you need to build the business case and to make it sustainable to promote adoption across the value chain. So I think it's about also region for region. Not all regions have been blessed with the same, you know, plants or, you know, but the science, and I think he talks about that, like fermentation. We knew fermentation. I mean, in the history of humanity, it started with fermentation, right? And now we are fermenting other raw materials, right, to bring them to flavors. I mean, like natural vanilla in our case, we do that rather than, you know, vanilla is very scarce. It's come from the orchids. Rather than transporting this, and it's not sustainable, we are now finding new source of, we call it natural vanillin, and that goes to your preferred chocolate cakes or to your best fragrances, right? So, and it's affordable and it's reliable. So I think it's innovation scale and then regulatory, and allow me to talk a bit about regulatory, is to have the right framework, right, to get faster permitting and not be too much bureaucratic around the adaptation and adoption of new critical, you know, bio-source material. So I think this calls into the EU in Europe, to the US, or China taking the biggest economies to really easy up the regulatory framework. Because sometimes when we have it, the innovation is there, when we can scale it up, where the customer is ready, you know, the bottleneck is permitted. And it takes years, right, to bring that. And we cannot wait years for the growth. So grow anywhere, but then when the growth is going to hit your top line, it's ready, then you have the regulatory framework which needs to be ready.
Great point. So, Patrick, let me turn back to you. Where does Agilent see the biggest opportunities, and what sectors? And
yeah, so if you look at one of our key markets in biopharma, I mean, there's really centers of excellence around the globe, like Cambridge in Massachusetts, Bay Area in California, parts of Europe and Zug, and of course in the Research Triangle. And when you look at the diversification of supply chains, the two things that stops, I think, moving to different geographies from these centers of excellence are really two things: regulatory pathways and the availability of talent. These are two really combining factors on it. And when you see that countries that have invested in bioproduction training, also training in our tools and workflows and help with regulatory, that is an area where you can move very quickly. So it's really a government plus technology private partnership to really train up capability on it. And not to be, I would say, not to talk about regulatory. Regulatory is something that's really important in bioequivalency. So you have to be able to set up, and it requires a lot of revalidation, retesting on it. And that's where Agilent can kind of come in with our tools and services to make sure customers can come up and running and secure their supply chains.
okay, thank you. So, Viswa, to what extent can innovations at the discovery stage meaningfully influence resilience later in the pharmaceutical supply chain?
Yeah, I think I gave you one example where directly the same technology that allows us to discover new chemistry and turn it into medicines allows us to make sense of really complex chemical reactions, generating data at scale, to create AI systems that could massively increase yield, maybe create redundancies in starting materials that chemists wouldn't normally think about, just like AI can now generate poems at will that would take a lot of creative humans a long time. And that we're very, very excited about. But there's at least two other things that our technology has directly led ourselves to innovate and make our own future supply chains resilient. One is we have our map of the world's genetics. We can take almost any organism in the world, and we can identify the genes, and we can also predict which ones of those form parts of biosynthetic pathways that can be used for fermentation. But so far, we've only had a genetics-first lens to this problem. By being able to comprehensively understand the chemistry of any organism completely independent from the genetics, we've created what I like to call a path to the skeleton key of synthetic biology. If you know all the genes and you know all of the molecules and you understand that across the biosphere, you can then precisely say, why is it that this hibiscus flower with the exact same genes is pink instead of red? And that can teach you new things about the chemistry of nature and how nature itself, makes the myriad miracle molecules that she does. And this can be used for two things. One, it can fundamentally change the speed and scale at which what and how we can use fermentation. And in fact, we've taken one of our molecules, early stage of our molecules, that has a bottleneck in its supply chain, which comes from a very interesting Indian plant, and we've explored the pathways of how it's produced much faster than what would have been possible, and are working with a fermentation partner to explore what that would look like if it was scaled. And this was likely not even possible, so I can't say how much faster it would have been. The second is you can say, instead of fermentation, let me understand how the plant is converting sunlight and carbon dioxide into this molecule. And when you do, you can say, great, I understand all of the chemistry and how much of it is being shuttled to this one thing that I care about, whether that's a vanillin or it's a breakthrough precursor for an atopic dermatitis drug that we just announced that could be used for 30 million people worldwide. And we can say, I'm going to break some of the genes so it's forced to make more of what it does. And while I'm at it, engineer the plant so that it can be grown in Rajasthan or Mexico, and I have a globally resilient carbon-negative supply chain. And both of those we've already enabled, even though our medicines are in phase 1, phase 2 trials, because we are looking to treat massive chronic diseases.
Are regulatory issues something that you have to confront?
As far as regulatory goes, the framework is clear enough, I think, in the pharmaceutical space. One thing that we did consider is it's far easier to remove a gene from a plant, because then it's not considered genetically modified, because plants lose genes all the time naturally, as opposed to adding genes into the plant. And so having the full genetic map and the chemical map allows us to pick a host plant that has the greatest resilience for where it can grow, and rather than adding in genes to turn something GMO, we can knock something out, and then we can grow it with any commercial farmer worldwide.
Terrific, thank you. Bahia, let me turn back to you. Looking ahead, where have recent supply chain disruptions most clearly exposed vulnerabilities, and what practical conditions would need to be in place for bioinnovation to address these?
Right. So as I mentioned a bit earlier, we import 95% of our requirements in raw materials for our factories. And obviously during COVID, as Ilham mentioned earlier, we had difficulties and disruptions. We had to pre-bring all our materials, so the supply chain was disrupted. It was very expensive, and we had to actually store a lot of our raw materials in. Thankfully, it has a 2-year shelf life, so it was still possible. In the long run, it will be very difficult. And what we're trying to do, along with the metabolic matrix, is actually to change some of our ingredients, sugar being one of them. And how can we do that? We mentioned fermentation. There are other ingredients that replace sugar that are good for you. One of them is allulose. Allulose has been approved in the US by the FDA. It's been approved in Japan, in certain countries. Unfortunately, it has not been yet approved in Europe under Codex. And it has taken now more than 5 years. So regulatory difficulties, because Kuwait and the Gulf countries use Codex rather than using FDA, we haven't been able to use this material. Now, this material, the allulose, can be produced from fruits, vegetables. Kuwait being in the Gulf countries where you have a lot of dates, like North Africa, you could create allulose from dates. But regulatory affairs don't let us, right? Because Codex hasn't been approved. That could be a way forward, for example. It's part of fermentation again. That's on one aspect. The other aspect was because of the fructose in our juices, we cannot re-add the fibers that are in the fruits themselves. And we are looking at different labs to see what can be done with the fructose. So this is where I think the biolabs could add value to not only us, but to many factories around the world. If we're able to get the regulatory to be faster in approving things, then it would be easier. I mean, I understand there's a long list of approvals, but some of them are really critical for the health of the human beings at the end of the day, and sugar being really one that we are trying to fight as much as possible. What did we do with our supply chain? What we tried to do is obviously have more space to be able to import all this. But we're looking at other strategies with other companies to see how can we do it in a better way? How can we not be disrupted by this geopolitics that are happening, especially in our region? This doesn't seem to stop. Every year we say, oh, maybe next year. And we need to be innovative. And I believe the metabolic matrix that we created would be able to help us in the future, especially with the allulose, because that would really help us in 60% of our range of products, if not 100%. And in the past 5 years, actually, in the past 2 years, we've been able to change 10% of our portfolio of products into metabolically healthy products. So, you know, it's a good result after within a 2 year period.
Yes, absolutely. And so, just building on your comments about how regulations are actually playing into what you can and cannot do. the ideal, of course, is that eventually everyone can grow anything, anywhere, but we're not there yet. And so, you know, based on geopolitics, regulations, et cetera, where are we in the trajectory? Are we seeing already some geographic shifts where there's some areas that are moving faster on bio-based than others?
So if you look at biopharmaceuticals, you know, I talked about the key core areas. You look at Asia, there's an explosion of technology and innovation in that sector, and that needs support from companies like Agilent. But I think what you're seeing around the globe is that innovative therapeutics are required for human health, for very, very difficult disease states. The pace of innovation is really increasing. And for example, in India, where you see there's a GLP-1 peptide cliff coming, they're gearing up the manufacturing for peptides in India for that area. And we've actually invested in Hyderabad with a Centre of Excellence to really help through the workflows of testing so they can get up and running faster.
Yeah, I think India is moving very
fast, and investing, of course, in centres of excellence and training in universities. So having that technology-based training is very important. That's very practical as well as theoretical.
Okay, anyone else want to weigh in on that?
I think for the pharmaceutical and biotech industry, you know, the word biotech comes from being able to use biology as technology, right? And so we've, since the first insulin was sold that was biologically produced, I think the pharmaceutical industry has set a standard. And the advantage we have relative to food is we work with a pure ingredient and make a lot of just one of it. Yeah. And that almost is a scientific necessity, not just a biological or regulatory burden. And I think the innovation on that, at least in our view, is less bottlenecked by regulation and is more, can we meet those specifications that are our responsibility as manufacturers of drugs?
Okay. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Behind you.
Okay. Please, go ahead.
Michelle Stansfield. I'm the CEO of a biomanufacturing fermentation company called Colluru in Australia. And my question, we're a tech innovator, WEF Tech innovation company, a pioneer company. So my question is for Baya and Ilham. Next to me, between these three ladies here, we have a biocatalysis company, I'm a fermentation company, and an extraction company, all tech pioneers. You understand through your metabolomics matrix which materials are of interest to you, and you know what materials are of interest to you. The three of us are looking for markets.
Oh, okay.
we know how to make molecules. I'm not asking for offtake agreements, but how are you working with innovative companies like us to inform which molecules you actually need to create these markets?
I'll go first. So our metabolic matrix is relatively new, right? It's around 2-3 years old. We have scientists around the world that we're working with. And obviously, it's available on our website, Kuwait is Small. We are reaching out to different companies. And yesterday, we were in Davos last year. We had a session on the metabolic matrix. We had a larger one this year. And it was on the accredited agenda of the World Economic Forum. And we're hoping after the event yesterday that many people or many companies would approach us. But at the same time, we will be working with the platform of different companies and hopefully governments as well to make the metabolic matrix available for everyone. So we would welcome not only companies who are manufacturers, but obviously companies who are suppliers of these. I'd be more than happy to share that with you at the end. And our milk powder comes from Australia, so we are quite well known in Australia, just to mention that. The details of the metabolic matrix is available. I can share that QR code with you at a later stage, but we'd be more than happy. I just met Ilham today morning, so I didn't know what she did. That's just to answer the other question, but yes.
Yeah. So we'll start by getting to know who you are and what you are doing, and obviously telling you what are our needs and unmet needs specifically. I think it's like any raw material. Either your product is already fitting to some of our needs, or it's not, but you have the capabilities, and therefore it's an innovation discussion rather than procurement discussion, which is okay, you know. I mean, you want to be in the pipeline of our innovation. I mean, ScienceCo is an innovative company. Every year we bring 20% of our revenues are made with product less than 5 years old. So we love to innovate. That's our bread and butter. But we need innovators like you, and sometimes even those startups and those initiatives are not yet at scale, nor at the right cost. But then you need a companion, you need the support. And frankly, you have the agility, the ingenuity, which we may, you know, miss sometimes, even if we believe we're an innovator. We need people like you in our innovative journey. So I think I call it partnership. And I think after, I mean, obviously, chemicals is the mother of all industries. We serve every industry, including pharma, right? I think what we need is to prioritize where is the largest impact, the biggest one? Is it in personal care, right, in FMCG? Is it in bio-shampoo? Or is it actually in material for semiconductors or batteries, right? So I think, therefore, we'll segment, we'll look at what are the priority sectors. And this is about, I think you mentioned it, is about talents. I mean, I'm a chemist by background, so, but chemistry was a curriculum, and then you have the biochemists and the biologists. Now it's blurring, right? I mean, now chemical companies are hiring biochemists or biologists even. And Gen AI is making what you mentioned, actually, because chemistry, yeah, it's easy in some areas, but actually it's very tough cannot chat GPT the Mendeleev table. I mean, not yet, right? I wish that day will come sooner. But Gen AI will give us a bit the footprints, right, of all those natural ingredients available. And what is beautiful with nature, and I think it's called biomimetics, whatever, nature can heal, can generate, can recycle, is circular. And we are dreaming in our companies to make chemistry circular by design, which is not yet done. Because I'm 30 years in the chemical industry, and I learned to extract, produce, and dispose. And there is an end of life for the products. It's a crime to have end of life. I think we need to have a second life and a third life. So it's another way of thinking of bioeconomy, is how you make your circularity by design. And I think we need entrepreneurs and companions in this journey.
Thank you. Well, we're almost out of time. So I want to get to the part of the panel where we look at how do we advance the bioeconomy? How can we really move to a world where, you know, in any place we can grow anything? So how should decision makers evaluate the trade-off between resilience, cost, scalability, and performance when they're considering bio-based alternatives? So what would each of you say to companies that are maybe weighing whether they should move towards a bio-based economy? You know, even if all the pieces of the puzzle that make it perfect are not there yet, why would you tell them, you know, to move ahead? And what do you want to be the key takeaway from this panel?
Maybe I can start. I think resilience, I think every geography is going to have to be very resilient in their part of the bioeconomy. I think you look at the speed of the therapeutic advancements and what's needed. Costs will be high initially, particularly for setting up production and so on, but over time that scale will come out, and I think it's a great opportunity.
Okay.
I'd probably start with saying that it's good business. If you can use technology as a lever to both create better products that are good for everyone, or enable the onshore sustainable manufacturing of things that already exist, both of those lead to greater economic resilience and greater top and bottom lines for companies. And at the end of the day, I think the world runs on incentives, whether we like to accept it or not. And so showing that those incentives are aligned for everybody is probably the best thing to do.
We have 44 seconds, so one quick point.
Healthy, healthy, healthy. just be part of the solution, not part of the problem. So if they want to create things, just make sure that they are healthy. They're good for your gut, they're good for your liver, and they protect your brain.
Thank you, Pai. And you have the last word.
Well, I mean, resilience, security of the value chains, and diversification of sourcing. Innovation takes time. It's going to get there. It's the history of science and technologies. It's going to get there. And then for the regulator, we need one-stop shop. We really need to get simplification, cut the red tape, help the entrepreneurs, but also the big companies. And then sovereignty. I mean, we are here in Davos. We talked a lot about sovereignties and geopolitical tensions. So it's good for Middle East. And, all the lands have not been blessed with the same source of energy or food or plants, etc. So you need to adapt more and more to regional needs. And it's about affordability, building the business case, security at the service of humanity progress.
We are out of time. I'd like to thank our panelists, our viewers, and our audience. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. It was really great. Thank you so much.